So we're back. It's another day. We've got our quarter panel prepped. We did that late the one night. Oh, I forgot one spot I see. I need to put a few hole punches in there. We'll take care of that really quick. But otherwise, we've got everything ground down in terms of E-coating. We've got a nice layer of weld-through primer on, and we've punched holes where we're going to do all of our welds. So let me go ahead and put a few on the taillight area. Then let's go ahead and get this fit up. We're going to get it set, and then we'll start welding it in. So we didn't show any of this because we've done this many times on other panels, and the process hasn't changed. So, not that one. This one. That should be good enough. All right, so we're just going to come in, get this fitted up. There we go, it fits nice. Fits really nice, actually. Looks like we did a pretty good job the other night getting the mock-ups and everything done. This thing just popped right on. Everything's lining up pretty darn good. Let me show you with this camera. So when I put this on, what I find is easiest to do is to get this piece to slot in under our rocker panel, and then put this, make sure this goes on the outside of our door jamb, and then you can slide the whole thing on. Come around back and make sure you get this up over your tail light panel, and then everything should start to line up pretty good. A couple areas that I see are this whole piece here will move quite a bit and flex because of its size, so you want to line it up with your pinch weld area here, and down here just the same. We're actually pretty close on our pinch weld area here, but this actually, when I look at it, I'm doing this one-handed, so it's hard to show you, but if I line this area up, see we're actually down a little bit, so once I line that up, and then I press this in with our pliers, I tend to be able to get to line up pretty close here. Same with down here. Go ahead and push this forward to get a nice gap here. Our gap's looking pretty good. The only thing that I'm seeing that I'm a little bit kind of bummed about on the fitment is if you kind of come look this way. I don't know if that shows up on the camera very well, but getting this curvature to line up with this curvature is going to be a little bit of work, and we might have to come back afterwards and just shape it a tiny bit. Everything else is going to be pretty simple. We're just going to use our locking pliers to attach everything in place. We'll get it where we want, and then we'll come through and start doing some spot welds. We'll come along the edge here. Everything looks fine. I do see that when we're done, we'll be able to trim some of this away that we did. We already did that back here. We're looking pretty good. Everything up top should fit pretty well. When we get to here, I've kind of spaced these out a little wider. What I'm going to do is come through and either in some of the existing spot weld holes or drill that bit through and put a self-tapping screw to pull these two panels together, because there is going to be a little bit of a gap when I butt this up because this is sort of pushed back a little bit. Now I did check with my door. With this pushed forward, there's plenty of space for the door, so we'll be able to work our gaps. So let's go ahead and work on getting this cinched down. You've seen it a million times, so all I'm going to do is go ahead and work on some alignment, get this attached with some locking pliers, and then we're going to start marking for some welds. One thing I had noted in the fitment review was how this section just behind the lower rocker panel may need some work to match the curvature. Well, I ended up finding that once it was clamped, with some upward pressure, kind of pushing it up as it was clamped down, I was able to match the radius. And you'll find that with many of these parts, the stamping is flexible. As you align parts or get them to match the pinch weld areas, you often get them to flex into the exact right shape.
So don't just check the fitment. Also pay attention to how things match, body lines, curves, etc. Now, I must say that these parts have been great to work with in that regard. They've been very accurate. Oh, and I must say I broke down and had to have some music in the shop, so some of this video we're going to have to annotate over. And some parts of it, they're things we've done many times in the past, so we'll go ahead and speed those sections up.
Like that.
Now you'll see how excited I'm getting that this panel is finally coming together. I hope I'm not too excited to forget to hit the record button on the next part.
I'm having one of those days. I'm pretty confident that I forgot to hit record on our camera here. So you've missed a lot of action. I've been doing some welding. So in the case that I did miss it, this is fill you in. I mean, you've seen us weld panels in the past. But what I'm doing is using our pliers. We clamped everything down to where we want it. And then I've gone around and I've already done the bottom. I've done about 4 welds on the bottom. I've done 2 or 3 welds up in the wheel well area here, and I've now done 4 on the top. What that's doing is cinching our panel right where we want it. It's locking it in place, and then we can go through and skip around and do all of our rosette welds. What I'm doing here is I've got these pliers, which are quite nice. These are really nice spot weld pliers. I can probably put a link on the video. What these do is they go behind the 2 panels, you sandwich them together, and it has this nice copper piece on the backside that almost acts like a heat sink and pulls heat away. So it allows you to have a little bit higher voltage, penetrate the metal faster, you get the weld done, and it ends with a flatter weld. And you know that you've gone through, and you don't burn through as easily. So it prevents you from burning through on the thin sheet metal. So on the top here, it works great everywhere. You just clamp it on and you weld and you move. On the top, because it's got this curved section, it doesn't allow me to mount it close enough. You can see here it sort of wants to move. So it doesn't really compress these panels together as well as it could. So what I've been doing is, in order to get the heat sink effect, I'll put it on and then come at these 2 pliers on either side, kind of like at an angle, and use those to extra leverage to push the panels together nice and tight, do our weld, let it cool for a few seconds, move on to the next one. So let's go ahead and do one since you've been missing that. Let's do one in the center here. Those stuck in there. See, now it's kind of hard to get this. Let's try that one. And then if I move this, super close to it. I know I'm in the way, sorry about that. So that kind of helps pull it in. Come through with the welder. Come in and get those. So that's really what we're going to be doing, is a lot of just going through and welding. And since you probably missed the ones we did before, let me just finish that down so we don't lose it. Let me go ahead and rotate the car back up. As you can see, we've got a couple down here, got a few here, and our panel looks like it's locked in, welding in pretty nicely. So we're looking pretty good. Looks like I can probably do a few more here. The lower ones, this thing works pretty good. Just come along. Tighten in like that. And I was showing, in case you had seen me come along with a drill and do that at all I was doing was scratching the weld-through primer in the hole I want to weld. The whole idea for that is if you laid it on too thick, or if you're using some product that doesn't have a ton of zinc in it. I found in the past with another brand I was using, it was hard to strike an arc through the weld-through primer. So 2 things, you don't need to make it super thick, you just want that coverage. And this stuff I'm using now, I've actually had no problem striking an arc through it. But what I have found and learned from experience, you just come here with a drill bit, scuff it up so you can see a little shiny metal. It's where you're going to be welding anyway. And the rest of your stuff's protected, but it ensures you strike a good arc to get the weld started. Again, probably not necessary with the stuff I'm using now, but force of habit at this point. Nice, and we'll let that cool a little bit. Make sure we don't pop it off too early while the metal's still molten. Pop it off and move to our next one. See, I don't think I scuffed that one up. No, I did. All right, never mind. All right. So that's going to be our life for a little while. We're going to go ahead and start welding this in. But the good news, like I said, we've got our weld started. We're going to go around and finish them off, and we'll pop the camera back on and show you what it looks like. But in the meantime, I'll get some close-up views for you, so you can kind of see. Now, you can tell that as you go along, you've still got a few areas like here that's sort of spaced out. But then as soon as I clamp it down, oh man, I made that too tight to do with my right arm. I'm left-handed. Let me switch. Or maybe I just made this too tight in general. There we go. You can see there it kind of cinched it in a little closer. And that's what you want to do. You want to get that cinched in nice. Of course, we've got some holes here that aren't going to be filled because this is where we did some repair. We didn't pull it down quite far enough. So we'll clean that edge up, kind of level that out, finish those welds off. Wheel well's coming along fine. I was having a problem with the wheel well. This material's very thin, so I've been going a really low voltage here, just enough to get this attached and not burn through. It's a little bit more tough. Some of the areas very thin. You got to remember, up on the back of this lip, that's where all the dirt, grease, grime from the road lands. A lot of cars, that's one of the first places they rust out, is along this lip, because stuff sits up in there and rots it out from the inside. So that metal is in good enough shape to continue with, and luckily I didn't have to rebuild it, but it is a little bit thin. We'll come along to here, and then eventually I'm gonna have to tackle this area. As you can see, we've got a little bit of space. We'll have to hammer and dolly. I pulled some of these out as I was doing the holes, so we'll cinch those up, but we'll probably use the self-tapping screws to kind of pull this in. And as we said before, there are some access panels. We'll be able to go in there with a pry bar if we need to and push it forward and attach it. So that's it. I mean, there's really not much else to this. It's stuff we've covered in other videos. We're just going to go through and do it. If we see anything that was weird, we'll let you know. So I'm going to continue and do some welding. All right, so as you can see, we've made some pretty substantial progress. Now, towards the end of our rosette welds, we don't need to rely on our clamps as much because we've really clamped everything and sandwiched it together pretty good. Now, the only thing I want to do when I'm welding here is make sure that, as you can see, sometimes when you weld, you get a little flare up from the weld through primer. Well, that's not a big deal. However, I did put quite a bit of coating underneath here, so I want to make sure that I ground far enough away and have the coating on that there's no flame ups going on in the back. Pretty easy, just check, nothing. Yeah, I don't know how much it would burn. It would probably just burn out, but I'd rather check and not find out the hard way. So, I don't know if you were around for, I don't know if I had cameras on for this, I don't think I did, but I was welding this stuff. I had the table near me, and one of the hot cherries of metal had flown off to the side, landed on a rag that was on top of some tools, and I thought it was far enough away. Apparently it wasn't. I walked away, grabbed a drink, standing over there on the side of the shop, look over, and I see a 6-inch flame coming off the table with the tools burning underneath it. So It was easy, just patted it out, but it's good to stick around while everything's hot. Make sure that there's not something that was smoldering that's going to flare up right when you walk away. So all in all though, this looks pretty good. So this is on. I've got pretty much all of my welds down here done. I've really got to do the wheel well, where I've only got about 6 or 7 of them done. I've got to do this where I have none, and I've got to do this back here. So that. All right, now that we've gotten most of our quarter panel welded in, the rear wing here, we're going to go ahead and start getting this taken care of. So we've already got one of these tech screws in, and we're going to do a couple more down here. Basically pull this in, get some welds put in, and then we'll be all set and good to go. So let's go ahead and put one in here. All right, we got that. I just like to get a little pilot hole in those, and then I can use this to self-drill. You can see that'll pull it up nice and tight. And then once that is pulled up, we did bend this a little bit to get some of our holes punched. So we're gonna come through. And just very lightly, I know it's loud on the camera, but we're gonna very lightly body work those in. Now, if I don't want to machine screw them all in just to give myself a little bit of extra feel for it, I can further tighten them with the ratchet. Nice. Now it's tightening up nice.
I like to hand tighten some of the screws, especially the first few, as that gives me a feel for how they're tightening up, make sure the panels are coming together and not binding. Now note that you don't necessarily need to pilot drill them. I mean, they are self-tapping screws after all. And after the first few are set, I usually just go ahead and drill them straight in without a pilot. They are a bit harder to control when you do that, but once they dig in, you get the hang of it.
Now, the other thing I'm noticing is there's a little tiny bit of a gap here. It looks like my edge is actually hitting where this curve comes out, where this kind of dent is here. So we might want to come back and trim that slightly, but I think we'll go ahead and work on getting this welded in first. So what I'm thinking is we've got nice tight seam pretty much here to here. I say we go ahead and weld that in. And then we'll take the tech screws out, we'll knock down any bumps there, weld the holes for that, and then we'll come back in here, we'll trim this just ever so slightly with our 1/32 cutoff wheel. We'll just kind of put a little tiny bit of an edge there. And that should be good to go in and take care of that. And then we'll take a look here and just make sure that we're happy with how this is fitting. But all in all, I mean, it's pretty well spot on, so I'm actually pretty happy with how it looks. We'll let that cool a little bit. A couple of them, I'm so close to the edge, it's hard to not burn through the little edge piece, and you can kind of tell on some of these, the hole that's punched, there's like 1/8 of an inch to the edge, so as you're welding that and getting the pool heated up, it kind of just melts away the edge there. So what I do is I like to come back and just put a little bead there, which we'll grind off later, and hopefully, again, you know, we'll seam seal this and try to get rid of that body line and make it look nice when you have the door open. So yeah, some of the stuff underneath, you know, it's like you can cover that pretty easily. It's not a big deal, but sometimes stuff like this, you know, you're going to see when you open the door. So you want to make it look as nice as possible.
More music in the shop here, so we're going to go ahead and speed up the final welding we did on the door jamb. Once the door jamb was done, we went ahead and moved back to the tail light mount. Now the method here is much the same. Use some Tek screws to ensure the panels fit together tightly, and go ahead and do a few spot welds. Once those spot welds are done and cooled, remove the screws and finish off the rest of the welds. Once the welds are done, it's time to grind. If an area is concealed, we may not grind it completely flat, but most of these areas here are visible or they're used to house other parts on top of them. So we got to go ahead and grind them. Now take care when you do that. You want to grind it smooth, but you don't want to grind below that and grind into the good metal beneath. I'll say this, grinding in the door jamb was a bit harder. It requires a fair bit of patience and a lot of careful work with the grinder. The angle grinder can be a bit aggressive, so don't be afraid to use the roll lock disc and take a little more time. I swear I thought we were done welding, but nope, we got to do the wheel well.
So I think by now you know the drill. We're going to fill in all these spot welds. We're going to use the same techniques we've always used. We'll catch up with you in a bit. All right, so we're all done with our welding. So we've got a lot of grinding to do, but we're not going to do that on camera because it's boring to watch and you've seen us do it 100 times before. So, but our quarter panel is in. Everything seems to line up good. I'm pretty happy with the orientation of it and how it sits and how the welds went. We got all the welds in the wheel well done. Our patches are good inside. We know we're solid inside and behind this panel. And everything's looking good. So I think that's what we're going to do to wrap up today. Obviously, we're probably going to move on to the other side and knock that out. But we wanted to get one kind of detail all the way through on camera. And that's what we accomplished today. So, well, it wasn't today. It was over the course of a few days, as you might have noticed, since my hair changed. But at any rate, hope you enjoyed this. We'll try to keep more videos of our progress going, and anytime we do a new panel, we'll share with you how to do it, what we learned. And you know, I'll just throw it out there. This isn't the only way you can do this. There's always different ways you can attack a problem. You can cut the spot welds differently. You can make reference marks differently. You can line things up differently. I'll just share with you what I'm doing. And hopefully as I go along and start assembling this car, we see that the way that I'm doing it actually did work and we're able to align the doors and the bonnet and everything. I think I mentioned in this video, I'm a little nervous about putting this on first and how that door alignment will be because I can't move this, whereas I can move the door and the bonnet and that all has to line up in this area. So that's going to be fun. And it's all cascading. So all this here, this back here, etc. You try to reference it to the original build of the car and you hope that you did it right. So measure 17,000 times, cut once, weld once, or 700 times, depending on how many spot welds you have. At any rate, we're looking pretty good. Let's wrap this video up. If you did enjoy this and you want to see more of this car, drop us a like, a subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll keep you updated here on Vortex Garage.